Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, over the next few days, I go ahead and I intend to plan the following. I'm going to do some of the important models, right? Some of the important growth models. And to begin with, we are going to, of course, whenever you start studying any growth model, the starting point is Solow model. So I'm going to start with Solow model, but this is how we plan the sessions, right? So we are going to do the Solow model first without technological growth. Then we will do the Solow model with technological growth, right? And then we will go ahead and we will introduce some new things in the Solow model, right? So the next thing that I intend to go ahead and I intend to do is where we go ahead and we do something which is called as so we introduce a B term, right? And we call this as the Hicks neutral productivity term. I will show you kaise kaise chalega. We will introduce the Hicks neutral productivity term and do the Solow model with this. So when I talk about the technological growth model that we will cover first, that is going to be Harrod neutral. So we will do Harrod neutral Solow model. Then this has a term called A with it. Then we will do Hicks neutral Solow model, which has a term called B in it. And we will go ahead and we will compare the two growth models also, comparison. Right. Then what we will go ahead and we will do is, we will introduce another version of Solow model. And that version would be called as Solow model with human capital, right? Solow model with human capital. And we will try to analyze that model and we will also do some empirical study of this kind of Solow model, that how the how the human capital has shown in the data, right? Is there any growth in the economies based on the human capital or not? Then we will go ahead and we will talk about some more empirical data where we will be talking about how the income distributions have evolved. So evolution of the income distributions. Right? We will also talk about what is convergence, right? What is conditional convergence, right? What is the great divergence theory, right? This entire thing we will do in the Solow model. So it is much more than a basic Solow model. Then what we will go ahead and do is, we will introduce something which is known as the endogenous growth models. And I will start with something called as the economics of ideas, right? So we will talk about what is the economic of ideas, what is ideas for that matter, and how ideas can be introduced within the production function. Okay. Isme, I will talk about the fact that why these ideas should be prone to increasing returns, why they should have increasing returns, right? We will also go ahead and talk about that. We'll talk about what is a rivalrous, why ideas are non-rivalrous, why ideas are, why they are, first of all, what is the difference between rivalrous and non-rivalrous, and how they become non-rivalrous good, right? Why they are close to what is called as a public good, right? We will be talking about that. Then we will be talking about how these ideas have led to the starting point of industrial revolution. Okay, how this has closely led to industrial revolution. Post this, we are going to talk about how there is a linkage between population and ideas. कैसे population और ideas एक दूसरे के साथ closely linked है. We will be talking about that. We will also try to go ahead and based on this, then we will introduce the Romer model, which is called as the engine of growth model, right? So how Romer model differed from the Solow model, right? What is the difference between the neoclassical models and the model introduced by Romer, right? Model introduced by Solow and Romer, how they are different from each other. And what is the theory of the ideas? We will be talking about that. We will also talk about what is the reason for growth in the Romer model. Romer के according क्या चीज है जो growth लाती है? Across these models, when we do the Solow model, the Romer model, etc., we will also be distinguishing between something which is called as growth and level effect. So we will be talking about growth and level effect in the Solow model, and we will also be talking about the growth and level effect in the Romer model also. Then post this, we will be progressing a bit further and we will be linking the Romer model at an aggregate level. So we will be talking about how the final goods sector has an effect in the Romer model, how the research sector has an effect in the Romer model, and how innovations have an effect in the Romer model. Then post Romer model, we will build a mathematical model for the Schumpeter growth model. Right? So we will go ahead. Schumpeter works on the theory of creative destruction, but how we can go ahead and show this mathematically? And then again in these, what is the role of different sectors, research sector, goods sector, etc. We will be talking about that. And we will be comparing closely the difference between the Romer and Schumpeter model, how they differed, what was the difference between these two things. We will be talking about that. Within this, I will introduce something very important, which will be the role of research and development and how you go ahead and you find the optimal level or optimal value of research and development of R&D. I will be talking about that too. Again, I will be doing a mathematical way of solving for the optimal level of research and development. Once we go ahead and we do this, then I will be taking you further and I will be taking you towards a continuous time period, and I will be showing how steady state can be found in the Romer and Schumpeter model. So we will be also talking about the steady state. And I will be introducing a very important term here, which will be called as technology transfer. We will be talking about what is technology transfer, what is the what is the importance of intellectual property rights, and how they have a role to play in these two models. Then I will be creating another model for you. And that model, it will be called as the model of globalization and trade. Right. So we will be creating a model where we talk about globalization and trade, right? Again, a mathematical model for the same. And then we will try to see that whether countries were actually affected or not because of this difference in the way that they brought globalization in their country. Does globalization and trade actually affect the income distribution and growth in different countries or not? And that is where we are going to go ahead and we are going to talk about the role of globalization and trade in the income distribution and growth of the countries. So this is my plan for next few days. I want to talk about the Solow model. Of course, I have gone ahead and I have already given you a lot of models. If you look into the portal, you will see Solow, Harrod-Domer, Schumpeter, Nurkse, you will see Hirschman, you will see multiple models, right? But I want to go beyond it, right? In the Solow model, usually you would have seen that what is covered is only without technological growth and with technological growth. And always this A term is introduced. So I want to do one step ahead. I want to build mathematical models for these three things, right? And for this too. And similarly here, you would see that there is a 10-minute video on Schumpeter model, but I haven't posted the mathematical part of Schumpeter model, right? So I want to go ahead and now I want to introduce the mathematical portion of the Schumpeter model, and I want to go ahead and I want to discuss that in detail. Okay. So that is my plan for next 10 5-10 days. I think it will take 10-12 days only for me to go ahead and cover all the models in the mathematical format. Okay. Let's start. To begin with, the first model that is ever taught in growth, whenever we talk about growth, the first model that we ever teach is called as the Solow model. Before we do any model, we must be aware about what is a model. Model bolte kisko hai? We must be aware about that. So model is a mathematical representation of different aspects of economy. I know that in economy, there is investment that is taking place. In economy, savings are taking place. In economy, research and development is happening. In economy, technological progress is happening. So we know that there are multiple things happening in an economy. Economy में बहुत कुछ हो रहा है. When we try to represent this mathematically, when we try to make a mathematical model out of it, that is called as model. So model is nothing but a mathematical representation of the different aspects of economy, right? Whenever we talk about model, you will notice that whenever you study any model, चाहे आप Solow model पढ़ो, Harrod-Domer पढ़ो, Romer पढ़ो, कुछ भी पढ़ो, whenever you study any model, you will realize that models are often very simple. We cannot, to explain very complicated things also, you will go ahead and have a simple model. कुछ भी बहुत complicated बनाने के लिए भी representation जो करोगे उसको simple तरीके से समझाने का कोशिश करोगे, right? So to go ahead and explain something very complicated, you need to make a simple model, but the insights should be well enough. मतलब ऐसे एक मॉडल बनाओ कि मॉडल तो बहुत सिंपल हो, बट जो उससे उसको यूज करके जो उसके आउटकम्स आए, द इनसाइट्स दैट यू गेट आउट ऑफ इट, दैट शुड बी ब्यूटिफुल, दैट शुड बी एबल टू कन्वे अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स, right? So for example, the basic demand and supply model, right? Just from demand and supply, we know so many things about an economy. हमें ये समझ में आता है that quantity demanded and price are negatively related to each other. Quantity supplied and price are positively related to each other. When the income of individual increases, demand curve will shift to the right. Demand will increase. जब demand बढ़ेगी तो supply will increase in the equilibrium. So a simple model like demand and supply can get me insights about so many things. Exactly that is the role of the model. We want to do a mathematical aspect of the economy, but in as simple way as possible. Now this is where in 1956 we had Robert Solow coming up. तो Robert Solow जब आए, that means जब उन्होंने Solow model दिया, तो पहले उन्होंने एक सेमिनार में एक पेपर पब्लिश किया. In 1956 he gave a paper in a a paper, and that paper was on economic growth and development. और इस पेपर में what he went ahead and he did, the paper he wrote was on contribution to theory of economic growth. He gave a model, जिस मॉडल से हम इकोनॉमी की ग्रोथ को एक्सप्लेन कर पाए. right? So in 1956, for the first time, he titled a paper and presented it in the seminar. And the paper was on the contribution to the theory of economic growth. Now, for the same thing, in 1987, he was actually awarded Nobel Prize. 1987 में इसी चीज के लिए उनको Nobel Prize दिया गया. When we study the Solow model, there are some assumptions that we need to go ahead and we need to study. Assumptions रहेंगी कुछ Solow model की. So these are the main assumptions of the Solow model, right? The first assumption of the Solow model is single homogeneous good produced and consumed. So it is there is only one good, सिर्फ एक good available है, right? The good is a homogeneous good. मतलब there are not, you cannot distinguish between the good. There is just one kind of good and the good is homogeneous. It is produced in the economy and consumed within the economy. Now, since there is only one good, एक ही good है, and the economy itself is producing it, वो खुद भी ये produce कर रही है, there is no need. It will want to go ahead and get this good from outside. Good, when do you trade with other countries? One, when there is heterogeneous goods. बहुत अलग अलग तरीके के goods हैं. You are producing some goods, other economy is producing some other good. Or two, when you don't produce any good at all, आपने कोई good produce किया ही नहीं, right? Then you are taking it from the other country. But in this case, we are assuming that there is a single homogeneous good. There is only one good and it's the same. एक ही तरीके का good है, visible to everyone. So since we are assuming that there is a single good and it's a homogeneous good, so that is basically produced and consumed within the economy, there is no need for trade. बाहर से कुछ भी लेने का जरूरत नहीं है. So that's another assumption, that there is no international trade. Output is in terms of GDP. So basically, when I write Y represents the output. And we know through national income accounting that product method, income method, and expenditure method are the same thing. So output can also represent the GDP of the economy. We also go ahead and we also assume that technology is exogenous. Now, this is only for some time. This is only for some time, right? Later, we will try to go ahead and we will try to incorporate technology within the model. Right? So, पहले हम technology को we will take it exogenous, determined outside the model. Later also, we will keep it in a way exogenous only. We will take its growth rate, but we will not discuss the reasons why technology is growing. हम ये नहीं बताएंगे technology grow हुई क्यों. We will just go ahead and we will just say that yes, technology is growing at some rate, but currently in the first model that we will study, we will not say technology is growing. We will assume that technology is constant. ठीक है ही नहीं, it is outside the model. Basic Solow model. In a basic Solow model, जब हम Solow model शुरू ही करते हैं, we talk about two kind of equations. There are two main equations that we study in the Solow model. The first equation that we have, that is the equation of the production function. A production function क्या है? So what is a production function? Production function is functional relationship between input and output. Production function is a functional relationship between input and output. तो जब हम ऐसे कहते हैं that I am going to employ some labor and some capital and I will produce some level of the output, right? This relationship that I have written, relationship between inputs and output, that relationship becomes my production function. इसी को हम production function बोल देते हैं, right? That's the first thing. The second important equation which we will be studying in the Solow model, that will be called as the capital accumulation equation. उसको हम बोलेंगे capital accumulation equation. The capital accumulation equation will basically go ahead and tell us how capital is going to grow over time. So accumulation means what? Accumulation means इकट्ठा करना, right? So how I am going to go ahead and how I am going to change my capital over time, कैसे इकोनॉमी में कैपिटल चेंज होगा ओवर टाइम, दैट विल बी कॉल्ड एज कैपिटल एक्यूमुलेशन इक्वेशन. Now just try to think about it. What are the reasons why capital can go ahead and change over time? Well, the first reason why capital can change, that can be that there can be investment, right? So if you do investment, जैसे आज तक I had, for example, I had one machine. Now I purchased two more machines, right? So when I will be doing investment, when I will buy new machines, that will increase my capital, right? The second reason why capital can change over time will be depreciation. When there will be depreciation, depreciation means wear and tear of capital. Wear and tear of capital. That means that there is going to be decline in capital. Capital कम होने वाला है. So when there is going to be depreciation of the capital, it is going to go ahead and decrease the amount of my capital. Okay. So investment increases the amount of capital. Depreciation decreases the amount of capital. When we go ahead and when we take these two things together, जब हम इन दोनों चीजों को ही एक साथ कंसिडर करते हैं, when we try to go ahead and consider both these things together, then that basically goes ahead and gives rise to capital accumulation equation. So capital accumulation equation basically tells us what is going to be the change in capital over time. And both these equations, ये दोनों ही equations Solow model में बहुत ही important है. Okay. Now let's talk about the production function. So as I told you, what is production function? How inputs are converted into output. कैसे हमने inputs को output में convert किया, उसी को हम production function बोलते हैं. That is called as production function. Now just try to see here. Here I have taken something which is called in microeconomics as a well-defined production function. Well-defined production function. माने अगर मेरे को इसको in microeconomics, if I were to go ahead and I were to plot this thing, तो I would have seen कि मेरे पास यहाँ से जो isoquants आते हैं, that would have been well-defined isoquants, proper convex isoquants बनते. You remember microeconomics, right? We would have got proper isoquants here. Okay. Another thing which is important in this production function is that if you notice, the sum of the power alpha plus 1 minus alpha is coming out to be 1. And when the sum of power is 1, basically we know that it is nothing but constant returns to scale production function. What is constant returns to scale production function telling us? It tells us, क्या बताता है हमें, that when you scale your inputs, your output scales by same amount. हम जब भी इनपुट को स्केल करेंगे, आउटपुट एग्जैक्टली सेम अमाउंट से स्केल होगा. So for example, in this case, let us just try to go ahead and check this out. So I have my production function as k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha, and I'm going to go ahead and put lambda everywhere, right? And this is going to give me lambda to the power alpha, k to the power alpha, lambda to the power 1 minus alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. Or when I will take all lambdas together, I will get lambda K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. And this is nothing but my original production function. And ये जो था, this was my scaled production function. So when I scaled my inputs, my output is lambda times the initial level of output, which means that it is following the constant returns to scale. Right? So this is an important assumption of the Solow model, that in Solow model, you will have constant returns to scale. Mane, whenever you will be doubling your input, your output will exactly double itself. Whenever you will double your input, output will exactly double itself. Okay. Now let us go ahead. अच्छा, एक और बात है. We just assume alpha is between 0 and 1. Okay. Now, there is another thing which is important here. There are two inputs, right? एक तो हो गया हमारा labors and दूसरा हो गया capital. So we have our labor and we have our capital, right? We assume that the labor gets W, which means the wage rate given to us for labor is W. And the capital gets rent. And the rental rate is given to us as R, right? So worker is going to get W and the capital is going to get R per unit that they go ahead and they work. We also assume that there is perfect competition in this market. So perfect competition होने से क्या हो जाता है? We know that whenever we talk about perfect competition, there is no economic profit. कोई भी economic profit नहीं होता है. So if I were to write my profit function is total revenue minus total cost, right? And since it is perfect competition, we know that profit is going to be 0. I will get 0 profit. So when I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get 0 profit, it actually goes ahead and it means that TR minus TC will be 0. So I will go ahead and get that TR will be equal to TC. Total revenue will be equal to total cost. Now, what is total revenue? Total revenue is price into quantity. What is total cost? I am either spending on labor or capital. So it is nothing but WL plus RK. Let us say, suppose that I am taking price at 1. I am normalizing price at 1. ठीक है, जरूरी नहीं है, you can keep price as it is also, you can normalize it at 1 also. So I will get 1 into Q equal to WL plus RK. Right? And we just said, हमने क्या बोला था कि जो हमारा output है वही GDP है. Output and GDP are the same thing. We said in one of the assumptions, right? So we can go ahead and we can therefore get the output is nothing but GDP. Y is equal to WL plus RK. So we are saying that the entire GDP of this economy, इस economy का जितना भी aggregate income है, इस economy का जितना भी GDP है, it is going ahead and it is getting split between two people. One is the labor and second is the capital. दो लोगों में पूरा का पूरा GDP split हो रहा है. Nothing is left for the firms. No economic profit. Remember. So this is what we have got from here. So ये मेरा equation number 1 हो गया, that entire output is shared among labor and capital. Entire output is shared among labor and capital. Acha, let's go and take this a little further. Now, any firm, whether it is perfect competition or not, will always want to go ahead and maximize its profit. हमेशा वो अपने profit को maximize करने की कोशिश जरूर करेगा. How do you maximize your profit? Very simple. You find the first order condition. So here, in this particular profit equation, profit क्या है? Total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue क्या है? Price into quantity. Total cost क्या है? WL RK. Right? So here, when we want to maximize the profit of the firm, there are only two things which are under the control of the firm. The firm wants to go ahead and decide the amount of labor that it wants to employ, and the amount of capital it wants to employ. So only these two things are under the control of the firm, कि कितना labor लगाना है और कितना capital लगाना है. So when the firm would want to maximize its profit, the firm will go ahead and differentiate its profit with respect to labor, equate it to 0, differentiate it with respect to capital and equate it to 0. So this is what we are going ahead and we are doing here. We differentiate this with respect to labor, we equate this to 0, and we differentiate this with respect to capital and we equate this to 0. So now if you just go ahead and if you look here, right, let's differentiate the profit function with respect to labor. What will I get? Differentiating output with respect to labor minus W into 1 equal to 0. Right? So this will go ahead and give me, this is how output changes as labor changes. Marginal product of labor minus W equal to 0. So marginal product of labor is equal to W. So I will go ahead and I will get that the marginal product of labor is equal to wage rate. ये भी एक अपने आप में बहुत important conclusion है that you know how much wage is given to the labor, it is equal to the output that is produced by labor. So if I employ one labor, मैंने एक labor को employ किया and he is producing 10 units of the output. So I will go ahead and I will give him wage equal to the value of those 10 units of output. Actually, if you notice, यहाँ पर P को हमने 1 ले लिया है. But if this P would have existed, suppose ये P एक constant की तरह यहाँ पे होता, P into MPL होता, so this would have become value of marginal product of labor equal to wage rate. So how much wage will I be paying to the labor? It will be equal to the value of the output generated by that labor. So अगर मैं 100 रुपए का output बना रही हूँ, you give me 100 rupees. If I produce 200 units of worth of output, you give me 200. Right? This is an important equation. Now, here is another thing. So what is the production function that we had taken? The production function that we had taken, that was basically this. K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. So if I take this production function, K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha, and I go ahead and I try to find the marginal product of labor. अगर मैं MPL निकालने का कोशिश करूं, so marginal product of labor will become how output changes as labor changes, right? And if I differentiate this with respect to L, what will I get? Power comes down, K to the power alpha, power reduces by 1. So this will be L to the power minus alpha, right? This will be nothing but 1 minus alpha, K to the power alpha upon L to the power alpha. Okay. So I have gone ahead and I am able to see that the marginal product of labor will be 1 minus alpha, K to the power alpha by L to the power alpha. Now look what I am doing. Just a little manipulation. If I just do L to the power 1 minus alpha here and L to the power 1 minus alpha here, I am multiplying the numerator and denominator with L to the power 1 minus alpha. So I will get 1 minus alpha, K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha upon L, and this will become marginal product of labor. Okay. अगर हम इस पार्ट को देखें, if I try to look at this part, this is nothing but the value of output. यही मेरा production function था. So I'm going to go ahead and get 1 minus alpha into Y by L. And we know that where my profit was getting maximized, marginal product of labor was equal to W. So instead of marginal product of labor, I will put W. Okay. So from here, if I just try to take labor here and output in the denominator, I will get WL by Y is equal to 1 minus alpha. तो इससे क्या पता चलता है? What am I getting? What information am I getting? It is helping me understand that if I try to find the share of labor in the total value of the output, it is going to be 1 minus alpha, right? Which was nothing but it was the power. जब हमने ये production function लिखा था, I was getting this as k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. तो यहाँ पे ये जो power है 1 minus alpha का, this basically reflects how much will be the share of labor in the total output. So for example, if I tell you that the total value of output is 100 rupees, right? And if I tell you कि मेरा production function कुछ ऐसा दिखता है, y is equal to k to the power 0.7, L to the power 0.3. So this equation is telling me that share of labor upon total value of output, माने 100, will be 1 minus alpha, that means 0.3. So share of labor will be 30 rupees. So out of the total value of output that we will be generating, जितना भी पूरा output होगा 100 rupees का, 30 rupees will be going to labor. Labor will get 30 rupees. Now you remember equation 1. What was equation 1 that we had studied? The equation 1 that we studied was y is equal to WL plus RK. This was coming because economic profits are 0. So we know that y is equal to WL plus RK. So if I go ahead and I divide throughout by y, I will get 1 is equal to WL by y plus RK by y. So RK by y will be nothing but 1 minus WL by y. और ये वाला शेयर मैंने अभी 1 minus alpha निकाल लिया है. We just found this as 1 minus alpha. So this is going to give me 1 minus alpha, which means it will give me alpha. So the share of capital in the total value of output is this alpha, right? So वो जो 100 rupees generate हुए हैं, if 30 is going to the labor, the remaining 70 rupees will be going to the capital. And this will be the distribution of the output among labor and capital. इस तरीके से labor और capital में output distribute होगा in the Solow model. Another thing, ये देखो यहाँ पर तो मैंने इसको ऐसे verify किया, right? I just verified it using this thing. But you can just take this as a homework and try this. So if you will differentiate your profit equation with respect to capital and equate it to 0, you will get marginal product of capital is equal to rent. आपको ये equation मिल जाएगा, right? And this will exactly give you this part that RK by Y will come out as alpha. So just recheck this thing. जैसे हमने अभी labor के लिए किया, right? We differentiated it with respect to labor and we got MPL equal to W, and from here we got that WL by Y is equal to 1 minus alpha. Similarly, you need to go ahead and take this as a homework and try to recheck it using profit maximizing condition.